Good afternoon, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen here and hopefully this works. And let me know if Finola, if it's not showing for everybody.
It's showing, yeah, perfect.
As Finola said, I'm senior engineer for Strand, and I've been involved in much of the pop-up infrastructure over the last 12 or 14 months. And you'd be glad to hear this is probably the wordiest slide I have, but just to cover some of the basics about what pop-up infrastructure is. And to my mind, it's infrastructure that can be deployed very quickly, and it's often bolt down, working within the existing constraints and not requiring road widening or drainage alterations, and can facilitate things like parklets or cycle routes, can be removed easily, which is one of its big advantages, that it enables things like trials to happen. And why would you use pop-up infrastructure? Well, obviously the short design and implementation time is a real positive, but it also enables you to react to issues quickly, like the need for cycle facilities like the coastal route, or more recently the outdoor dining, where parklets and tables and chairs have been deployed in pop-up fashion. It can also help resolve complex issues like concern over traffic movements or displacement and layouts. I mean, pop-up infrastructure could be as simple as setting out a row of cones to make sure a resident could make a particular new layout that's proposed, and it can facilitate those sorts of issues that don't escalate too quickly at the early stage of a process. One of the main advantages to it is that it can deal with the what-abouts. So what about traffic displacement? Well, rather than trying to go down a rabbit hole of modeling, or particularly in the moment during COVID, where modeling isn't really giving accurate results, but it also, you can use real-life trialing to deal with question marks that can't really be dealt with before something is built. What about things like accesses to houses or businesses and emergency services? So it does help deal with those types of issues. And the purpose of pop-up infrastructure, there's kind of three different scenarios there. Like, is it to deal with, say, an anecdotal battle over the status quo, which it can do, or is it to let people experience something before asking them whether they want to keep it long-term or not? Or is it to let people experience something and then it's tweaked to make sure that it's the most accurate or perfect scheme it can be before it's made permanent? So there are three very different, slightly different prospects, with the last one being a decision is taken to do something, and the pop-up measures or the trialing is a way to make sure that it works perfectly for everybody. The question is not whether it should or shouldn't go ahead. And if you're delivering pop-up infrastructure, it's really important, like the engagement is really important. And we had experience last year where we were deploying measures without prior public consultation. So something like an adaptive build model is really, really important, where you've got this circular process where you put in something, you evaluate it, you talk to people, you see is it working or not. If it needs to be changed, it's changed, and then it's evaluated again. It goes around in this circular process. And like, one of my lessons learned from the whole thing is that you really have to champion the engagement. And if you're open to change and you're making changes, that you're seen to be making them, and that it helps build trust with the people that schemes affect. And early versions of some of the pop-up infrastructure, by the time we had gone through a year of it, people know the people, you know, you've engaged well, and there's a certain element of trust that's built, which is really important, particularly for trialing. So ultimately, what are we trying to achieve? And it's active livable spaces. And I think that applies to all of the infrastructure that we're looking at, even if it's permanent or pop-up. And it's this style of, you know, an active landscape. And not to quote Jan Gall at an Engineers Ireland talk, but it's about the activity between the life between the buildings. And examples like this, where people are going around their daily life in an active way, but also that there's life on the street, that it's not just a place for movement through, that it's somewhere where people come and linger. And this is an example from Dundee of the Metals, where people come and sit and linger, and then they're more likely to spend money and spend time in an area. So at the early stage of any infrastructure development, being able to visualize and help build support is really important. And this shot is just a visualization that was done for Blackrock, which was our first pop-up scheme, and one for Tool and one for Ducky. And you can see that there are similarities in the style and the layout, but also it gives people that may not be good with 2D drawings a sense of what's actually going to be put in on the ground. And I think there's the consistency of visualizations also helps build. Well, we're looking to do a Blackrock here or a Ducky here, and people can go and visit it, and it helps build that support before anything is actually put in on the ground. One of the really good positives from pop-up infrastructure is the ability to do something really, really quickly. And for those that don't know the coastal mobility route, it's a 4.5 kilometre route where 3.6 kilometres of it is two-way segregated cycle track. And that entire length was delivered in 5 weeks over 5 different sections. And just to give you a sense of the speed of deployment, so on the first day at 10 o'clock when our road opening license kicked in, the cones were set out along the central line of the road and the top 2 cones were put in on the no entry sign. So pop-up infrastructure in its most basic form is traffic management. So that first 600 meters is secured and the space is there for everybody. And the end of day 1, all the lining had been burnt off and the parking bays were moved out. Day 2, all of the curbing was installed. Day 3 was bollards, and then days 4, 5, and 6 were anti-skid on the first section. So that became the limiting factor to the progress of the scheme, where we could deploy 3 meter wide, between 120 and 140 meters of buff surfacing along the route. So it meant that after the first week, 600 meters was provided. It provided a link from Newtown Avenue, picking up the existing contact flow facility that was there down to Sea Point Avenue. We did this section first knowing that was probably the area that's going to get the most amount of cyclists. So just to talk a little bit about the type of materials and the more dynamic engagement, and this is a good example of an entrance where typically we left 2 meters offset from the bollard to the pillar of the door, but the person that lived here had a vehicle that had the turning facilities of an oil tanker. Basically, it was quite an old vehicle. And if you see the timber curb on the right-hand side, it had a section cut off on it. So we were able to just get the carpenter down. He took 500 or 600 mil off the curb and moved the bollard. It took 8, 10, 12 minutes, but it potentially removed somebody that might have had a negative impression of the scheme or potentially object to the scheme. To just resolve the issue, and they were happy, and it helped build trust as well with the local authority that we did react to an issue that was a genuine issue. Another example of the type of thing where people always reverse out of their driveway, have never reversed in. So across a couple of different schemes, down to the arrange for traffic management guys to come down and hold traffic back and help residents try and reverse in and to do something that maybe they've never done before. And it gives them options that weren't there, like that this particular person wasn't able to reverse straight out because of the angle of their driveway, and it couldn't, the maneuver couldn't be done. But with a little help, we're able to learn how to reverse in and out, and that resolved an issue for them. Some other types of examples of the flexibility of the materials. We had provided bollards every 3 meters along the parking bays, but we were getting feedback that the door openings were compromised by some of the bollard placements. So we went back and we marked out the bays in specific sizes and the bollards in specific widths, so that if you're parked properly in the bay, that it kind of hit on your wheelbase and didn't affect the door opening. But again, a very low cost intervention that helped deal with an issue at a local level. And to facilitate the introduction of the route, a one-way system was put in, and a lot of people were concerned about the access for emergency services. And I've personally witnessed 5 or 6 different responses along the coast, and the coastal route actually, apart from having no effect on emergency services, it actually provides them with a corridor that's free from vehicles all the way along. And you know, cyclists are uniquely placed to be able to get off their bikes and onto the footpath if an emergency vehicle came along. And I did a walk through or drive through with the emergency services, and what some of the feedback that I get is it's quite disappointing to see people trying to kind of weaponize emergency service response as a way not to do cycle routes. And I think the drivers in particular are incredibly professional, and they would never object to something like a cycle route, or in the same way they would never object to something like on the pictures on the right, where clearly that the residential parking is having a more negative impact on their response times than the cycle route. But they wouldn't object to either. They just try and make sure that it's available to them in, you know, with the least amount of impact as possible. So these are just a few shots from the route, and I think what struck me at the time when we finished it is this diverse range of users, and it's young and old, people, mobility challenges. You see kids independently cycling from 8, 9, 10, and it's been a real eye opener for me in particular that when you build high quality segregated facilities, it does attract all age groups, and it was great to be able to deliver it in a pop-up fashion. And again, just another shot of the type of users on the route. So this is just an aerial shot of the coastal route with it marked in red. And it's been described as the kind of string of pearls, where the blue circles were the various villages along the route, the 5 towns, and there are also a number of other high areas of interest for people. And of course, the route and the mobility corridor in itself is the string, and it's the core and the basis, but it's not what's attracting people. You know, people would come to see the string once, but not twice. And it's these pearls that are attracting people back and generating the really, really high numbers that we're seeing along the route. And if you don't have these attractions along the route, what do you do? And I suppose you can pop them up as well. And this is an example of an area down near Glaston, which is about 100 meters from the village, and it's just 4 benches, 4 planters, and some valley lusk surfacing. And I remember the analogy that was used, that it was going to be delivered in a big splash. And I really like the idea of being able to just drop something in an area that can be put in over a day and provides a function. And these pearls along the route can be added. And we've gone back more recently and added public toilets to this area as well to further help with the reopening of the economy. But the pop-up infrastructure and little kind of points of interest along the route don't have to be high cost. And this is just an example of an area that was buff anti-skid was put down, and a single chair, and it's quite a sought after position along the route. I think if you take anything from this talk, cross-departmental and multidisciplinary approach to projects is probably one of the most important things that you can do when dealing with public realm projects. And I think there's a really healthy conflict is probably not the right word, but a healthy challenging of views when you get people from different disciplines in together. And photograph of Blackrock before any work was done. And from an engineering perspective, like, the space is secured, the lining is down, the bollards are up, it allows for social distancing, and the counterflow is there. So if I was to draw a scheme, that's where it would start, but it's not going to go from there to this without that kind of multidisciplinary approach. And having worked with our architects and urban designers over the last year, the kind of things that jump out to me in this photograph is the choice of colours that the planter boxes are painted in and how they complement the businesses. And that space is provided for the businesses to kind of add their own unique character to tables and chairs. The choice of the planting is very unique, and I think apple trees are in Blackrock Main Street, but also things like where the tables and chairs are placed. If I was to place a bench there, I'd probably have with the back facing the traffic so that people are facing in, but you can see there's a gap in the buildings and there's a ray of sunshine across the street, so that the tables and chairs have been set up to receive that sunshine. And that's, again, a kind of a sought after position. If you ever walk along Blackrock Main Street, you might see this single chair that looks out of place, but when you're sitting in it, it actually gives the only spot on the street that you can view the sea. And it's these kind of little gems along the route that the urban designers, the architecturally inclined people will bring to a scheme. Just another example of the kind of dual use of the planter boxes, where people can sit and linger in an area and it provides extra seating, but also the planting function. These are 2 photographs from Glaston Village, and on the left you can see the different style of furniture and ranging from kind of barrels to the more cast iron furniture that were provided by the different businesses. And again, it just gives it's a unique kind of sense of character, but the basis for it is still that kind of developed language of materials, where it's planter boxes and furniture of a certain style. Just a quick comment about Dundrum Main Street and the work that we did there last year. And this is the church on Dundrum Main Street, and they had done quite a big job on their own public realm in the past. And as part of the project, this system was introduced, but a kind of a plaza area was developed. You can see the tables and chairs and quite a large area of planting. And I passed through Dundrum during the week, and there was a funeral procession there, and I was struck by the public realm design and how it added a sense of privacy to the mourners in the church. And that's where really good urban design can really add value to an area. Just to say that, obviously, I've heard pop-up infrastructure being called plastic options and other things like that, but it doesn't have to be. And this is an example from Dalkey Main Street. And if you look at the photo on the right, where the slot drain is, to the left of it is a historic granite curb, and to the right of it is an exposed aggregate concrete that we used as part of the road narrowing. And essentially, it's a concrete that has granite aggregate in the mix, and a surface retarder is poured on it that's washed off afterwards, and it gives it that sense of weathered look, but also it's very much in keeping with the character and the heritage of the town. And in the planting in this particular area, there are olive trees, which again is a unique flavour to the village that's built on the same sort of palette and materials. And just another shot of the exposed aggregate concrete and how well it sits in with the local area. So this was the square about in Dalkey, as we call it, which is the before shot, and the visualization on the left of what was planned, and then the actual as built on the right. And I think you can certainly see it as a pop-up measure. It's still quite attractive and sits well within in the village or the town sense. Just a very, very quick slide on parklets, and it's something that obviously we're looking a lot at the moment with outdoor dining, but the parklets can be popped up in a very, very quick, and I think this particular one is about 25 meters long, that can be dropped in a day, and then they can be dressed with, again, the same style of planter boxes that can be filled with plants, and then they can be personalized depending on the business, and developing a kind of a recurring theme and style to your planters and parklets enables you to react very, very quickly with kind of stock pieces if somebody says. When it comes to evaluating pop-up infrastructure, it's all about the data, and the worst thing that could happen is that something gets undone because of an issue that's not data led. And just to give an example of some of the data we collected on the coast route, this was a camera survey that we did that measured queuing along the route and the time taken for cars to clear the junction. So some of the feedback we were getting was that it was traffic chaos, or the place was a mess, or traffic displacement. And if you look at the table on the bottom, so on average, it takes less than a minute for most arms of the junction over the week to clear the junction. And the 23rd of August was a Sunday. So Sundays were the busiest days, which to me suggests that it's people coming to visit Dún Laoghaire. And of course, if they meet a large volume of traffic, their impression is traffic chaos. But in fact, it means that more people are actually wanting to travel to the town, which is a positive. The slide on the top left is journey time pre-COVID and during COVID. So the journey time into Dún Laoghaire was actually reduced during COVID, even though there was the impression that it was worse. And it was also on the bottom slide is the cycle numbers for that week, and they were peaking on a Sunday. So there was more people cycling, which didn't require parking spaces, and those that chose to drive took them less time to get there, and they presumably had spaces available when they got there. But the feedback was that it was chaos, and the data doesn't support that. I think that's why it's very important to have that data-driven approach. And the Dún Laoghaire town has reported a 38% increase in footfall during COVID than pre-COVID, and the coast route has supported that. But that again is a data-driven kind of response. And for anybody that follows Robert Burns, our Director for Infrastructure, on Twitter, I mean, he's very, very good at selling and promoting that data-driven and the factual data that we've collected about the different routes. And I think it's really important that people champion schemes if you have good data. And just to say that Dublin are doing a body of research for us on the coastal route, because there are issues with local research in Ireland for things like mobility and pop-up infrastructure. And if you try to suggest to someone that there's a report done in Germany or somewhere in Europe, they rubbish that quite quickly. And having local research will be really positive. So we're looking forward to that paper coming out over the summer, and it will review the interventions that were done in Blackrock and along the coast. And that'll be hopefully available and of use to other people in the country. So just to conclude, dynamic engagement, particularly with pop-up infrastructure that doesn't have formal consultation, is really, really important. Multidisciplinary approach is essential. Don't be afraid to champion schemes and try and build momentum on work that you've done. And it does get infectious, and you do start to get this really sort of powerful forward momentum, and it's hard to sort of stop once you start going. Be open to changing things if needed, and if something isn't working, try and resolve the issue, and gather and base your decisions on data. Knee-jerk reactions to things are the worst possible outcome for pop-up infrastructure, because it removes that momentum that you've gathered. So that's all I have, and I'll pass you back to Finola.
Thanks, Conor. Share now. Okay, so afternoon, everyone. I suppose we've had a very busy 12 months here in the city, with some really interesting things happening for pedestrians and cyclists. So yeah, so I suppose from early 2020, the traffic department here, led by Brendan O'Brien, recognised, I suppose, that things had changed quite dramatically, and that the reduction in public transport capacity meant that when people started moving around again, walking and cycling were going to be extremely important to cater for some of that capacity that would normally be used by public transport. So a specific COVID mobility team was set up by Brendan, led by Patricia Reedy, who oversees everything. with different sections in it. So myself, I was looking after providing active travel improvements on the south of the city. So Connor's kind of touched on some of these already, but I suppose from our point of view, some of the advantages of this kind of pop-up infrastructure is its rapid deployment, the ability to trial different arrangements and materials. It's very easily adapted. It lets everyone experience the infrastructure. And then there's scope to come back and improve and make measures more permanent. So what we've been doing for pedestrians? Well, one of the first things I suppose we started doing was a number of build outs. So these were to create additional space in key locations, and they're quite quick to install with minimal civil works and disruption. So it's all about reassigning some of the space for the pedestrians. So we started out on Nassau Street, where there was a new contraflow cycle lane put in early last year, or around April, May last year, which created a bit of extra space that we decided to reassign for pedestrians. So this was, I suppose, used as a trial for this. So a very simple method. We just use these ready curbs, which are just bolted down. With eco drains for some drainage, and then just asphalt to form the space. So, you know, we worked with our liaise with our drainage colleagues and made a few changes both to the drain type and how the drainage system works. And we carried out a trial with some of the disability groups as well. Although this isn't a bus stop, we just trialed it as a bus stop, and we learned a lot from that, which we then took forward into our next target, which was down in College Green. So there's a number of locations in College Green that are normally both very busy with pedestrians passing through and also with pedestrians waiting at bus stops. So this was the first one that I looked at, which is down in the centre of College Green, I suppose. So the space then, I suppose, was given to pedestrians, both for those waiting for the bus and then for those passing through. And again, we invited the disability groups out and we trialed that, and they were much happier with this, the slope and the drain type. So we now had a blueprint to go forward. I suppose what we were doing wasn't going unnoticed around the city. So one of the first places that actually approached us was a group of businesses on South Ann Street back in early June last year. So they were looking to see if they could get some of the carriageway space to provide some space for tables and chairs. So this is what South Ann Street was, which was a line of parking and loading on one side. So the first thing we did is we just simply closed it off, which gave us a chance to see, I suppose, if there was any issues in the street in terms of the effect it had on loading and parking, but there was none. The street coped very well. And so then during our pedestrianization trials, it was an instant success. It was well used by the restaurants and cafes on both sides of the street. And so while we were out there on one of the Sundays, they approached us and asked, maybe could we look at doing what we'd done down in College Green for them. So I went out on the Monday and had a look, and yeah, it was certainly doable. So we were out there within a week and started to build this. So again, it's a very simple construction. The curb is bolted down. We put down a layer of sand. We've the eco drain for drainage, and then we put the asphalt on top. They do vary. I suppose this is just a different location, and most of them don't actually need any additional drainage. If they do, we just simply put down an additional pipe with a connection to the roadway just to catch any runoff there. And then we just finished it with a buff colour, and then I suppose the street is pretty much instantly transformed. And straight away then it was being used for outdoor dining, and I suppose this was the first one we'd done, and it worked very well. You know, it kind of reassigned this or assigned the space quite well. There's a dedicated space for outdoor dining. There's a dedicated space for pedestrians. We got to clear the whole street. There was a lot of bollards, signs, parking meters. We cleared all the space, so we actually created more space for passing pedestrians as well. So we're kind of using these build outs for, I suppose, three main different reasons. So one is for pedestrians. So this is on South William Street, very narrow footpaths. There was parking on both sides. So we removed all the parking and created build outs. Most of them on South William Street are just for pedestrians rather than outdoor dining. It's just another one up on Baggot Street again, which is additional space for pedestrians. And when you see, I suppose, the build out beside the original footpaths, you kind of really see how narrow the footpath was before that. We're also using them then public transport locations, so at various bus stops. So it's the number gone in on Cottage Green, up on Parnell Square, which were kind of the tightest locations. And then for outdoor dining. So again, dedicated space for outdoor dining, dedicated space for pedestrians. Footpaths are cleared, and a real bonus for anyone looking for outdoor space. We've about 20 of these done now at this stage, mainly around the Grafton Street area, Marion Row, Baggot Street and Capel Street. Now that everyone sees them, everybody wants them, but it's not possible to provide build outs at every location that is looking for one. So there are a large amount of cafes, restaurants, bars looking for space. And we've been dealing with them, I suppose, all the way through since last summer. But the number of applications has shot up in the last 4 weeks. We've had nearly 100 alone. And I suppose we would love to build out footpaths everywhere, but we have neither the time, I suppose, nor the resources to do that many in that short space of time. So we had to look for an alternative when it came to reassigning carriageway space, especially outside the very centre of the city. So we needed something that was temporary and removable later on if needed. Something that was very quick to install due to the sheer number we have to do. Something that would provide some sort of reflectivity as well, and provide some protection and awareness to vehicles that, you know, there was something happening here. Something that had a bit of height on it as well, just so that, you know, wasn't a trip hazard, and something that maybe looked a little bit better than bollards. So these are what we went with. These are zebra separators supplied by Pitman. So these are planted up. We've 400 of these being installed now over the next, or some have installed, but in the next 2 weeks as well. So there's going to be a lot of them around. And when you're at seating level, it certainly provides a lot of protection. And it allows us, I suppose, to get in there. You know, these are put in a couple of hours. We provide a ramp for accessibility. And then again, it allows us to come back later and assess, you know, which areas were successful, and, you know, we can maybe improve on some of them later on. Something we hear a lot, more I suppose on social media, but you know, Ireland or Dublin is too wet for outdoor dining. Well, actually it's not. I went back and had a look at all the rainfall in Dublin since 2004, and what I found was that most of the time it's actually dry. So between about 84 to 88% of hours every year, there is no rainfall, which is about 7,500 hours a year. So it should, I think, be plenty for outdoor dining. So it's just, you know, its perception doesn't always actually match the reality of these things. And even when it does rain, it might be a bit hard to see in that photo, but those areas there on Suffolk Street are all full of people. So, you know, Irish people are quite resilient to the weather, even when it's not the best. Similarly, it's too cold for outdoor dining. Well, this was Drury Street back in December in the afternoon in the shade. It was 4 degrees out. The place was full. I mean, people are in their coats and hats, but quite happy to sit out there for 20 minutes or half an hour and have their cup of coffee. I suppose one of the other things we've been doing, especially in the last year, is a number of different trials. So, you know, trying out various arrangements or various different things. So the first ones we did was Grafton Street pedestrianization. So just looking at our footfall data, we noticed that the Grafton Street area wasn't recovering the same way Henry Street was. So to try and, I suppose, increase footfall into the area, we decided to pedestrianize 5 streets around the area. So initially for 4 weeks. So we ran that from the end of July, and it was an instant hit. Extended for additional 2 weeks. You know, we learned a huge amount from doing that, what streets really worked and what areas worked. I held a public consultation then, and overwhelmingly positive to do this permanently. So 4 of these streets were, I suppose, made traffic free from Monday a week ago, 24th of May. And sorry. So yeah, so those 4 were made traffic free. And to do this, we had to move about 34 car park spaces in that whole area. the benefit is then we get all this additional space for pedestrians. No disabled bays were taken away, they were just moved slightly, and there's still about 2,300 car park spaces in the same area. Another trial we did then was up on Marion Row. So this was a request from the businesses to provide some space for outdoor dining by extending the footpaths on both sides of Marion Row. Marion Row is sort of 2.5 lanes wide at the minute, or it was. So we'd have to reduce that down to 1 lane, which would mean that we'd have to quite significant change to the traffic arrangements. We would have to reverse the adjacent streets, Hume Street and Eli Place. So the first thing we did was ask people if would they like to see this tried, and there was overwhelming support, over 90% support for doing that. And so we held a trial of the traffic arrangements, just so we can see ourselves just how it could work. So that was carried out 2 or 3 weekends ago, 15th, 16th of May. So we just reversed the traffic on the adjacent streets and took Marion Road down to 1 lane. And that gave us a huge amount of information then on how we could possibly implement this. And one of the things was very noticeable was the amount of cyclists, I suppose, that were looking to use this space. And so on Sunday just gone then, that's what we did. We changed the traffic flow on Hume Street and Eli Place, reversed the traffic, changed the parking to angled parking, just so it would be a bit quicker rather than people reversing into the perpendicular parking. Moved curb parking out, and we're able to put in protected cycle facilities as well, contraflow cycle facilities where there were none in that area. And this was Marion Row about an hour ago, so they're nearly finished the build outs. So come next week, Marion Row itself will be pretty transformed. There's a lot of things happening over the weekend. So the trial, I suppose, really showed us that, you know, this is something that we can certainly do for the summer and assess it then. But I suppose not all our trials are so big. Sometimes, I know Conor kind of alluded to this as well, we request the fire brigade or Dublin bus to come out, both who are really helpful and always do. And that gives us a huge amount of information as to, I suppose, where to position things and where to place things. I suppose my biggest trial of the last year is one that hasn't happened yet, which was the Strand Road cycle trial. I suppose I won't say a huge amount. It's being heard in the High Court in 3 weeks. But I suppose the trial was to see or put in 2-way or separated cycle facilities and one direction of traffic. So I suppose this isn't a completely new idea to us. It's something we started doing a couple of years ago. So I suppose it's just the evolution of a street. So this was Suffolk Street in 2014, which is just on the bottom of Grafton Street. So it was a very busy bus route, very busy pedestrians, very narrow footpaths. The Lewis Cross City then took away the bus routes. Unfortunately, there was the unintended consequence then of creating an all-day parking zone. And you know, there was signage and everything up there, but this is what happened. The businesses were very unhappy, asked could we do something. So I started having a look at this back in late 2018. And I suppose I should apologise to any consultants who are listening. So I'd started writing a brief for consultants to have a look at this. But as I suppose I was writing it, I was kind of figured, actually, do you know what? It might just be best to do something and see what happens. So that's what we did. We did a 6-week trial and literally just put bollards up the end of the street and closed it off. And I suppose, you know, again, it was successful pretty much straight away. You know, we had a few issues at the start. There was issue with the bollards. People found out how to take them out. But our blacksmith came up with a very clever solution to that. So that now, you know, they can't be removed by anybody. Once we did that, then we after the 6 weeks, you know, it was going to be made permanent, which meant we could improve the street. We could remove all the bollards, all the signs. We put down this buff color surface just to lift it. Put some planters in, and you know, by May of that year, by May of 2019, then it was completely changed. Even last summer, then, you know, we saw it being used in a totally different way again, and there's a lot of restaurants on the street, and it was full all the time. And And this was earlier this morning, so we completed a build out there a couple of weeks ago as well. So this will all be full again with seating now next week. And so just for time. So just moving on quickly to cycling then. I suppose in terms of a pop-up, I suppose the advantages are, it is a rapid deployment. It does give, an increased level of safety comfort for cyclists, particularly any less confident cyclists. We've mainly used bollards certainly initially, which has allowed us to, protect about 20 kilometers of cycle lanes in the last year. And the guys who've been out there putting these bollards in have been phenomenal. It's a huge amount of bollards to have done, and they're out there at 5 a.m. every morning doing it. Very quick results, changes it straight away and allows things to settle for us to see it. We do constantly review them, we do learn from them, take these lessons on to the next one we do, and where possible, we do love to improve the cycle protection as well. So we started, I suppose, pretty much in early April last year to providing space for both cyclists and pedestrians. So we have a number of different materials, I suppose. So some are just bollards, the taller bollards where we don't need to provide any curbside access for vehicles. And this is Richmond Street and Werbrook Street contraflow cycle track. We have the shorter bollards, the Shergans, where sometimes there is access needed to the curbside, but we probably use more of them in the beginning. We don't use them so much now anymore unless there really is no alternative. Parking protected cycle lanes. So this was Fitzwilliam Street on the left and Blessington Street on the right, the contraflow cycle track. So, moving the parking out, which itself provides protection to the cycle lane, provided obviously we can provide a good buffer between the cycle lane and the cars. On the North Quays, I suppose, was one of the schemes that was looked at very early on. So, just had a bus lane with shared cycle facilities, 2 lanes of traffic and parking. So back in April 2020, 1 lane of traffic and the line of parking was taken away, and the space was used or assigned then for pedestrians and cyclists with these lovely red barriers up initially. So they were placed pretty much all down the North Quays. But working with our parks department, those barriers were never going to be there long term. We managed to install these planters then, which totally changed, in front of the forecourts there. So instead of a line of traffic and a line of parked vehicles, you have a much quieter, much safer, and a much calmer space. In quite a special location there. These ones on College Green, again, I put these ones in quite early. Extending the cycle track that was there and protecting it with planters. So just because it was May at the time, just put in flowers and quite a few bollards. But again, went back to it, replaced them with trees, got rid of all the bollards, including the bollards that were on the footpath itself, to create this, I suppose, planter protected cycle lane. We've used these planters as well up on O'Connell Street. This was, I suppose, one of the most complicated ones that was done. I suppose just the volume of the buses, the volume of pedestrians, and just having the Lewis junction as well, obviously just makes it more complicated. So a huge amount of work done by the ITS team and Alec and his team in creating cycle track on O'Connell Street, which links up to Parnell Street and Blessington Street, and provides a much, no question, much better route for cyclists away from the cycle track and a more direct route. And it's been incredibly popular since it's gone in. I suppose we do have some cycle detection on our routes as well, but we are also rolling out these call buttons as well for cyclists. The other method we're using for protection of cyclists is the extruded curb. So again, this is on the North Quay. So initially these red plastic bollards were replaced by this extruded curb later on, and it's also used up on Constitution Hill. So where we have the space and, depending on the setting as well, it's certainly our preference in terms of, the visual appeal and the protection it provides. So it's obviously much less intrusive than the bollards or some of the other things that we have. And it's also used as well on Griffith Avenue quite successfully as well with the buff colour. Just a quick note, I suppose, as well as these kind of pop-up cycle measures we've been putting in, we have also opened up a number of longer term projects in the last year as well. So the Royal Canal Phase 2 opened last summer, which was a bridge both over and under a railway line. And on Seville Place, there was some, I suppose, pop-up infrastructure there. After a cyclist was killed, these bollards were put in, but it was a bad junction for cyclists with the railings and everything. But I suppose the railings provided actually a safe space for children who lived there, used to use that space as a playground. So the parking was taken away, the railings were taken away, and protected cycle facilities were put in, and I suppose a garden was created to, again, provide that safe space for the children, but also, brighten the place up and improve it. So have you seen much change in volumes in the last year? Well, I suppose the traffic volumes are now back up to about 80%, and they've followed pretty much what's been happening in terms of restrictions. Obviously, they dropped significantly back last April and have been up and down a bit since then. Has there been an increase in cycling? Well, our commuter cyclists haven't yet returned, but we hope that they will when they start going back to the office. What is positive is that, looking at the cycle numbers, the weekend cycling numbers from, the first 3 months of the year, this year compared to 2019 and 2020, they grew by 46%. So that's very encouraging, and hopefully people, will keep it up who've started cycling in the last year. In the city centre, so just for May, the last few weekends compared to 2 years ago, on Henry Street, the last 2 weekends, the pedestrian numbers were actually greater than they were 2 years ago. So there are plenty of people still coming into the city and walking around. Grafton Street hasn't recovered as well, but it certainly has recovered a bit in the last few weeks. So just a very quick note on consultations. I'm almost done. I suppose just the consultations, we have done a lot of them over the year, and I suppose when we're doing them, I suppose we just want to think, what are we looking for? What sort of feedback do we want? And on what stage of a project? So we just want to see if the public support a proposal. So that's something like Marion Row or Capel Street. Have we already recognised that maybe, there is a measure required? So if people have any specific suggestions or concerns, something like Werwick Street cycle route? Or do we put the measure in and then, ask for feedback during or after the trial? So something like the Grafton Street area pedestrianisation. So it very much depends on the project, what stage it's at, and what information we want people to give us. So these are just the consultations I've read in the last year. So almost 21,000 submissions from quite a few different projects and quite different projects as well. So I feel I have a reasonable idea of what people like to see and what they don't like to see. But it's great to get such engagement from the public. And as well as that, then we also had our COVID mobility request forms. We've had about 5,000 requests for that. We're still working our way through them. But again, it's great to get these suggestions in and get the engagement from the public. So just to finish up then, I suppose, there's a huge amount of knowledge we've acquired in the past 12 months. This pop-up type infrastructure, it allows for quick implementation and experimentation. And we are, going back and reviewing these measures and improving them where we can. So this is just one example here on Griffith Avenue where bollards were put in. Our city architects and parks have been working with us now to draw up a number of proposals for improvements, which is what we hope to do for most of these locations as well. Whether it's providing curbs or greenery or a bit of both. So, going back and reviewing these, find where they work and then hopefully taking away some of the bollards and improving the area. That's it. Thanks for listening.